Here it is, mid-August. It's where I am. It's a beautiful sunny day, and yet I'm indoors maintaining my natural Swedish male pallor. I don't want to get too brown. Um, anyway, our main topic for today is theoretically an American museum for Timex Sinclair stuff. We've talked a little bit about it on the email list, some of the challenges of doing such a thing. And what I really wanted to do was get y'all talking about it and thinking about, is this even possible? What would it be like? Let's think through all the issues. And this got raised because someone up in Toronto reached out through one of the Facebook groups and said, I got all this stuff for my grandfather. And he did all this software and did all kinds of cool stuff, and I'm scanning it and trying to preserve it, and then once I do that, I want to give it somewhere. And I'm like, I don't know where that somewhere is. And I feel like most of the somewheres that we could give stuff to, the vast majority of the stuff would end up sort of locked away in a closet, right? But let's start with your thoughts. And I have a question, sort of an icebreaker question. Um, what, if anything, do you want to happen to your stuff? Unless, I mean, that could be all of your stuff. It could be your Timex stuff. What do you want to happen to your stuff? Um, you know, in the next few years, next 20 years, whatever. When that moment comes that you're like, okay, I've had enough of this crap. I'm getting it out of my house. Um,
I
where's
want
it
it to
going
go
to
to you,
go?
David. I want it to go to
No.
you.
Okay, so no. Only if it's not been digitally preserved yet. Let me put that caveat on it.
Back up the truck.
So Paul, your answer is 30-yard dumpster.
Actually, no, not yet. But I have been dispensing with stuff
Mm-hmm.
the last year, and it's been recycled rather than trashed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have sent me a fair number of boxes, and I've
Good
I've
place
tried to
with
recycle it
you.
back out into the world as well.
Hopefully, you sold some of it to put, in towards the fund.
Absolutely. Yes.
Good. That was
Um,
the intent for some of that stuff.
yeah. We can talk about that a little bit later, but yeah,
Well,
that's
I think that you know, so we do have somewhat of a spread of ages here in the group.
mhm,
So some of that's going to be probably maybe a break point for that is pre and post retirement.
mhm.
You know, certainly post retirement. If you squirrel it away because you were going to get to it someday, maybe you ought to rethink that. Um,
Or now it's the
but
perfect time
all,
to use it.
yeah, you start using it. That now is the time, right,
Hmm.
to do it. Um, but also, I think sort of for the long term, might and maybe this gets towards some sort of museum idea is the continuing interest, because otherwise, at some point, the interest evaporates, and so it won't matter where anything is necessarily.
You mean the interest of people who are going to go to a museum or the people who want to have the museum?
Well, yeah, either one. I mean, so that there are some people, and maybe, for a lot of things, maybe that's only museum curators, is to, like take, for example, any of the existing ones. So, the big one in Mountain View, um, people there's people that are interested, and I guess people who aren't part of it that are interested, and they come to see stuff and are active in the preservation of things. So I think, it's not just putting it in a museum, it's, putting it somewhere that it might get seen and that interest can be renewed in these things to some degree to keep them going. Otherwise, as soon as that museum starts to have trouble, then those things in there just get put into another garage or thrown away or whatever. You know,
You see that problem in the pinball world too.
right.
Yeah. What did they do there, Paul?
Stuff gets thrown in a container and shipped somewhere else,
Okay.
and then sometimes just disappears.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe there's some people in Argentina or something that want some of this stuff. I don't know.
Hey, Paul, you got a Williams high speed sitting around somewhere? I wouldn't mind having one of those. Speaking about pinballs.
That's not the one I got.
Mm,
I won it in a tournament.
So
yeah.
does that make you a pinball wizard, Paul?
At one time, I was.
I
Kids
used
don't
to
like
work.
to play against me, I can tell you that.
I used to work at in my high school days, I used to work at a arcade, and I really enjoyed, working on the pinball machines.
Yeah.
You had to clean them, wax them, make sure all the rubbers weren't worn out. Um, things like that.
Otherwise, you get little pinball machines everywhere.
Well,
Well, Carl, you have a decent collection of stuff, right? I mean, I don't
yeah,
want to expose you too much, but
no, I do. I try to anyway.
and and you know, you, me, and Adam, and a few other people, were all sort of in our somewhere between 50 and 60. And so, in theory, we've got what, 20-ish plus years. And, at a certain point, it'll be like, you know, I got better things to do. I don't know.
Mhm.
Do you ever have anything better to do than play with a 2068?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's 90+% is other things, right?
Yeah.
I kind of get these little spurts of interest in, like I said, making that 1500 was kind of cool because I saw the one that was in the museum. I'd never seen a silver, the Timex 1000 case. I'd never even seen that. So that was a spur of the interest there. And of course, the Timex 2000, I've always kind of wanted to do that. So there's kind of the interest there, but it takes, some research and some parts gathering and things like that to kind of make all that happen.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts about what you're going to do with your massive holdings?
I've kind of thought about this to some degree, and I think as time goes on, interest in these bygone things will evaporate even more. I mean, there will still be a small core, interest in it. Obviously, I don't think that'll ever go away, but I think just seeing how many people we have here, just imagine 20 years from now, that'll probably be half or even less than this at that point, because the equipment will be 20 years older,
Mhm.
and there is silicon rot, right? So that some of these SCLDs may give up the ghost just from age, and silicon migration and things like that. Who knows? And then we don't have a replacement for that, and so they're going, what am I going to do with this thing? It doesn't work. There's no parts for it. It's I used to like to collect some cars. I used to have like 10 or 12 cars, and it got to be just too much work for that. So I just decided at that point, let's just get rid of them all. Plus, but cars are different, right? Cars transcend time a little bit more, I think, especially from the Timex and I would think in Britain, the Sinclair is more of a cultural thing, I think, because so many people were exposed to it there. As far as here, Timex Sinclair computers is not so much, right? I think it was a pretty niche back then, and probably even more so now. It's not like an Apple or a Commodore or a a TRS-80, which had much more American, um, presence.
Mhm.
Right.
And so you're going to have more interest, I think, in those machines. Not to say that, we shouldn't preserve the Timex stuff. It's just, I don't, a museum is a real, in my mind, is a real tough call because, we can't say what's going to happen to it, 5 years down the
Mhm.
road, 10 years down the road. So any equipment that gets into there, I think ultimately, when the museum does fall in hard times or loses interest, or, the benefactors just don't want to pay for it anymore, all that stuff's going to end up, either in the trash, or maybe they'll give it out to some other people that we already, we're kind of already doing, especially me, right? I kind of want to get the more rare things, um, and just have it in my personal collection. But when I pass on, I really hadn't given thought to what, I don't, nobody that I know other than, Adam and Ryan, and maybe a few other people here in New Mexico, would even care. I think, I'm sure there's probably a few more, but most people are like, what the hell is that? What am I going to do with that old rail? I don't even have
That,
anything to hook it up to.
but I think that's why, I mean, I don't know that there's necessarily a deck museum, for example. There'd be something in their headquarters because they still exist, perhaps, but there's exhibits in various places, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I'm saying. I think that the only chance you have is to be an exhibit and something else. I mean, most of that stuff in Computer Museum in California is, it's not all about one brand.
Right. I understand that.
So,
Yeah, you couldn't have just a Timex museum. Nobody would, unless you had
but
a lot of watches in there.
by being a part of another, you're exposing people who didn't maybe not knew about it, and they become interested. You know, they're there
Well,
because they're interested in computers, and then they see these other machines. Like when I went museum, I saw all these other machines I'd never heard of, even,
mhm.
and those are interesting too.
Well, luckily we have emulation. So, I mean, if you really kind of want to play something on the machine and you don't have one, that capability is now available to us, right? And the other thing is, preserving things, scanning things, making videos of things, kind of like what me and Adam did. That helps preserve that as well, right? So it's not a museum per se, but it's still preservation, and it's still something that people can look at, years from now, right? So physical preservation and a physical museum, I think probably the best bet in America is probably not going to work out too well because, like I said, it's such an obscure, small niche market that we had here for the Timex Sinclair stuff. But if we sent it to Europe, like UK, I think that would be more longevity wise because, again, Sinclair was part of their culture, I think. Not so much now, but certainly back in the 80s and 70s, right? I mean, I don't think, I'm sure a lot of British folks knew about Sinclair, right? Just maybe it was good, maybe it was bad, but they knew about him, right? And as opposed to the United States, which is so much bigger of a country, right? Um, and then Timex was such a small part of that, whereas in Europe or UK, they're the size of what, I don't know, uh, uh, Nevada or something like that. They're the size of a state, a good sized state here, and that's it. That's their whole country. So their whole culture of Sinclair and everything is all concentrated into one little country, and so it makes much more of an impact there because he was the computer guy, right? I mean, other than who else? Acorn, some of those guys were starting to come out back then, but I think he had a big cultural impact, at least back then, where a museum of Sinclair stuff. That's why I think you saw, like you saw Ryan, there's a couple of those there, right? And there's tons of, I mean, not just Sinclair stuff. I think the one you went to was pretty much Sinclair. It seemed to be, they had all the, not just the computers, but the, his test equipment and the radios and the little amplifiers and all the things he was making. Um, but here, I don't know. I just don't. I don't
Ryan,
know.
Well, I
the
think that. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Well, that museum that you went to that had the Timex stuff and the Sinclair stuff, it still is rather rinky dinky, right? I mean, it didn't look like it was some major museum. It was still very small.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not exactly the Rosetta Stone in there,
Yeah,
but
but I guess the ZX81 isn't very big to begin with, so it's proportional.
yeah, his stuff was kind of small. Uh, they're smaller as Carl would attest to. They're generally much smaller than an automobile. So,
Well, the other thing,
I mean,
Gustavo's there, and Argentina and Portugal, that may be another place. Obviously there is the ZX Load Museum there. So, and of course Timex was a pretty big part, I think, of that computer revolution, right?
We have a computer museum here in Buenos Aires, in the main city. It's official museum, but it's not within any specific part. Just only cover all the computers used in Argentina, since the old tube computers till the IBM or Commodore or whatever, all the homes computers too. But this is a small house in town, but I don't know what is the status today. Open a few days per week, is not open all the days, okay? But I think that the best option is the Computer History Museum in California, because this was complete with any items when the Boston Museum closed on 2000. Apparently, more parts of the museum in Boston was moved to the History Museum, the computer in California. But I visit the Boston Museum. It's great. It was a great place to show the computer and the history, but now it's not exist because that was part of the Children's Museum near the port of Boston, but it's not exist now.
Well, and I think that
Yeah.
DEC was a big digital equipment was a big donor for that one in Boston.
yeah,
Exactly.
they had quite a presence in these museums in the UK I went to, because they were, they talked
Because
about them
yeah,
deck in the UK, and I think they would help sponsor those exhibits there.
Yeah.
But they still exist, so
Well, I mean, they got
sort
bought
of.
out by what, Compaq, I think, at one point, and then Compaq
Yeah,
got bought out by HP or something. So
it exists in a sense. Yeah.
right, yeah. But
Well,
I
the
don't
other
think
thing,
anybody's in Lowell anymore.
yeah, the big thing, I think, when it's the birthplace of the home or the personal computer, obviously would be California. So I
Yeah.
would think somewhere especially in, San Francisco area, obviously, because that's where Silicon Valley, and most of those companies started out, Apple, and not necessarily Commodore, I don't think, but certainly Apple and who else? Gosh, I'm just drawing a blank, but Altair,
Atari.
yeah,
Atari
Atari.
started out there.
So I'm sure, obviously they have a museum there, I'm sure, but so is Timex represented in that museum in California? Or does
Timex
anybody know?
has a developer office in California
The
during the
com
80s.
Yeah, the Computer History Museum, presumably the museum that you are talking about in California, is kind of more of a science center now. Back when I went there like 20 plus years ago, they had like racks and racks of computers. And of course, they have like one of everything, because essentially everybody gives them stuff. But access to things like that is kind of pretty limited at this point. And it's much more of you kind of get to go see a few things, but you don't really get to go play with anything or much. And except when they have their special stuff. And a lot of the stuff is kind of hidden away. You can go to their website, and they, in theory, have most of their artifacts in some form or another on their website. And often if you search for obscure references to obscure hardware, you will often run across their site having one of whatever it is. But those are generally not out there for people to see. They're, I don't know, in storage somewhere.
Kind of like what we do personally. It's in the museum's closet somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not out for exhibit, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm looking at, as Mosley was referring to, I did a little search of the computer history museums. You can search their catalog, right? And it's full of the usual kinds of things, Mempack 16K for the Timex ZX81, they say. However, there was, yes, the Triangle Sinclair users group they have exactly one issue of the newsletter.
And that's the problem too with these museums is you can send the Timex up there, but there's nobody there that's going to really know about it, right? Yeah, you're sending it to them, but they're just like any other person that would get a Timex. Well, I don't know I don't know how to do anything with this. So it's not like you're going to get any value, I guess, out of. I mean, sure, you can exhibit it, but nobody's going to know how to use it or what the history of the Timex computer, none of that kind of stuff. And there's, because that's so niche information anyway. That's kind of the beauty of the internet, right? At least you can look up stuff like that and you'll get to, David's site or, some other sites that are, obviously started in the UK. But, so you can get the history. It's just not, going to a museum, you're not going to get it, right?
Well, it sounds like, something like that computer history museum, it's got critical mass, but now it's trying to cover everything. So you've got the problem of, it's covering all these things, all the history, and so any one little part becomes very small, and the only things that can be practically on exhibit in a finite space are the bigger, more popular things. I mean, to some sense, it sounds like, there could be room for something that's a little more specialized, but again, it can't be too specific or it won't work. And that was the difference with some of the UK ones where like you had the hands-on areas. I mean, obviously that doesn't scale necessarily or last forever. Which reminds me of a thing I thought of earlier when you were talking, Carl, about, the things, like the chips eventually going bad, and then someone faced with, oh, I can't even fix this. And, and maybe that's one of the jobs is making sure that all these have some sort of future proofing to, at the very least have recreations, if not parts to replace all of those parts. But I think that might be some of the appeal of those bigger old iron in those museums is that, they can pull a whole rack out and there's no component that's much smaller than this. And that's all easy to do. I just need to spend a little time in there replacing all these bits. But then you're faced with this board with a whole bunch of super high integration surface mount stuff. People just like, eh.
The
Well,
big
luckily,
iron's a different category. And I mean, essentially, what gets replaced, you can look at it and say, oh, it's nice that the chips are pretty big and there's a whole bunch of really big components that are easy to see, but then you turn the board over and there's a shit ton of wire wrap. And you look at that and you're kind of like, even with a map, it's going to take you like a week to figure out how to get from point A to point B on some of the wire wrap stuff because it's all wire wrap on some of that stuff. So, comparing it's kind of pointless, and it's probably better to kind of focus on like number one, how we can continue to maintain the Timex Sinclairs over time, as you point out, with chips going bad over time and also expertise on repairing these things. I mean, I know nothing about it. I'm learning because a friend of mine's an EE person and he's teaching me some stuff here and there as we repair various things, not specifically Timex Sinclairs at this point, but other machines. But a lot of the knowledge is hitting that tipping point where there's going to be a bunch of people who worked on it who will disappear soon, within the next 5 years, 10 years maybe. And we're going to be getting to the point where, like, you know, it's going to be hard to find anybody who actually had a hand on one of them back in the day. And that's the knowledge. That's the tricky bits, is if we want to keep them going, we got to find a way to collect the knowledge and get the knowledge distributed to people who are coming along, who aren't quite in that category, and who, you know, can continue to repair them.
I think it's important that I think the only way it's going to be preserved is through FPGA. That's a way to preserve the hardware for future people. And same with replacement parts. Between Picos and FPGAs, you're not going to get new parts unless you can recreate them somehow.
Well, luckily for us, you know, most of the Timex machines and the Sinclair machines are standard logic. So that should still be around. I mean, obviously they're not making them new, but I think there's plenty of them still, you know, out there that we've got a pretty long life cycle there of getting parts. It's just the specialty ones, you know. I think at this point, everybody or somebody has created a replica or a recreation of every part of every Sinclair machine except for the Timex 2068 SCLD, although they did do that in
Portugal for the TC
right,
2068.
they did it one for the TC 2068. They I don't know how to get those chips, or they're even, you know, but again, like you mentioned, FPGA design there. And then, so you know, it shouldn't be too much different to maybe incentivize that guy to maybe look at the 2068 and create a FPGA for that version. Or maybe we can get a daughter board, right, that kind of, you know, finagles the signal lines to where they need to go on the 2068 and use that, right? Because obviously somebody doesn't want to put a lot of time and effort into something when they're not going to really get anything back, right? I mean, somebody might just from the, you know, their heart of hearts wants to do it, but most folks want to get some type of return out of their investment, right? And I just don't know, you know, Timex, how many 26As did they sell, right? So, as opposed to like a Spectrum, right? So if I make you know, these replacement ULAs for a Spectrum, well, there's a market for that, right? I will definitely get some money back. I mean, there won't be one forever, but I mean, at least the design's out there, and but there's nothing for the 1500s ULA, SCLD, and the 2068. So, you know, maybe, you know, some of these folks that have done these ULA replacements, especially Charlie, you know, over there in Australia, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a shit ton of knowledge that he has there that he could probably apply to the 2068, but you know, I don't even know that he has one, right? Because we're talking Australia.
It sounds to me like there's probably value in, you know, never mind how many potential, sure, it helps if there's a market. I'm going to make this chip. There's probably 100 people maybe want one. This point, you know, that's probably gravy, I would think. And if we just focus on, let's just make sure that effort happens. What would it take to make that happen? You know, and if we could get all the machines where you take those designs and you finish them out, you have them public so they can be maintained. So as we get into the future, maybe this part's no longer available and that can be updated to, okay, what's its replacement? And that keeps living as a design. And anytime you can go and grab it and make one, right? Rather than just, oh, there's a replacement part over here. There's a design for a part over here. And you got to get that. But you have to start with an old unit and replace that. The next, you know, there should be, take those designs, the recreations, even though they aren't the original units. Because we talked about that, of all the parts decaying, and then eventually the plastics are going to go, and You know, you don't have anything, but it'll be like, you know, those British car restorations. They've got like one little piece of a rusted fender of a Jaguar from whatever, and you build that into an entirely new car.
Yeah, yeah.
Good point, Ryan. I agree with you. And according to the future, one of the most important part is to document the hardware and software that the Timex use. This is important part to put the theory as complete the technical manual and also any information related to the computer. The idea is to, in the future, maybe use another technology to emulate this as, I don't know, artificial intelligence or whatever, any future process that can replicate the model of the computer. That's why, for example, when I create the emulator of the 2068 plus FDD system in one program, I also use all the coding technique in
Hey,
software, of
Gustavo,
course. Yeah.
will you actually give us just a couple of minute history of that? Because I don't think most people even realize you have your own personal emulator that you wrote that no one else has access to.
No, okay, no, the idea is to document my work, because if I lost my work, it's missing.
True.
And this is the idea to the Ryan mentioned, okay, to put in a common place all the information that we have, not only the hardware, but only my contribution will be the theory of the operation, okay, in software plus hardware.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I don't know of anybody that's made these replacement parts, like the replacement ULAs, have their designs public, right? Because like I said, there's effort that went into reverse engineering that and coming up with these designs. And I don't blame them for not making that public, but I mean, I guess you'd have to talk to them. Maybe 5 years down the road, they may do that. But it's like there's a lot of knowledge there that's other people that are kind of more fluent in FPGA design can kind of look at that and go, oh, okay, I can figure out what they're doing, right? And I can apply that to any newer version of FPGA that comes out, right? As long as they've got the the VLOG code or the Vera code, whatever the code they use to make those FPGAs. Once you have access to that, then you could pretty much manipulate that and to put it into any FPGA. So, like you said, it would be a living, as long as somebody put the effort into it and obviously had some, knowledge in the FPGA design or programming, that they could certainly, keep that going. But again, I don't think we have anything specific to the TS 2068's SCLD or, the TS 1500's SCLD. And too bad we can't get like, well, we'd have to modernize it, right? Because whatever NCR was doing, making those things, standard cell logic designs, that's pretty much obsolete at this point, right? we don't do chips like that anymore.
I have a question here, Carl, just direct, like a normal museum would never do anything like this. I mean, they collect stuff, right? Put it on display or don't put it on display, but they don't like try to recreate, like a car museum isn't going to go out and recreate a 1924 Ford.
Oh, they do.
So,
Yeah,
Aircraft
museums do
aircraft
this?
museums do it all the time.
yeah, and
Some car museums are actually just collections, but they qualify for museum status for tax purposes.
Well, that's okay. Give me an example of like this car, like an aircraft, like they recreate a whole aircraft,
yeah,
and a museum does this?
Yeah.
yeah, the volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are places, physical places. There's a place in Massachusetts, the name of which escapes me, but there's one near me called the Amherst something or other museum, and it's both a museum where you can go and look at stuff, but then they also have people who make new old things, as it were. They have like a regular blacksmithing thing that goes on, making new old housewares.
I think they do that at Dayton also.
Yeah, so most of the aircraft museums have their own restoration workshop, And if you go talk to any of those guys, most of them will tell you, yeah, some parts you can find. And in fact, the museums I have found often will ship parts back and forth between them. If somebody else is building a constellation and they need an engine, and somebody else somewhere else has a couple of engines from a constellation and none of the rest of it, and they're not planning on restoring it anytime soon, they may ship them an engine and say, hey, you know, someday if we need parts, you send us parts and things like that. But there's a lot of parts that cannot be found anymore for aircraft that literally don't exist. And so somebody mentioned there's an aviation museum in Cleveland. There's actually an aviation museum called MAPS at Akron Airport here in Ohio. And I mean, they have an entire like kind of separate building that they do restorations and rebuilds in of their aircraft. And there's a bunch of aircraft. If you take a tour with them, they will tell you, you know, oh, we kind of cobbled this together from a bunch of parts, and we had to manufacture a bunch of things. They had just recently put on display a helicopter where they had to make their own opening bay doors for the nose of the
Oh
helicopter
my gosh.
because they couldn't find any of those anymore. And so they just had a metal shop that made them, and then they had fun because they had the specs, but you know, making it to exact specs was interesting. And so they kind of had to do a couple of little twitches to actually get them to open after they actually attached them. And that was a fun thing that you get from taking a tour. A lot of the aircraft museums, if you ask them, they'll happily tell you what parts are real, what parts are not. So that's a standard thing in museums. The dinosaurs exhibit in Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry will list that I think it's like 77% original parts or something like that throughout the museum, throughout the dinosaur collection. But there's at least like some percentage of parts that they just manufactured because, you know, they don't.
You're talking about bones or fossils, I mean, like where they just
Yeah,
get a replica from another one? I see.
yeah.
Yeah. This is
Yeah, there's
also
other
big in railroad. You know, there's folks who restore, you know, rail engines, steam rail engines, and the
Like
diesels.
a
But
real size ones, like original?
yeah, the real things. You know, they'll go out and try to find. They have expression for rail engines and cars and whatever that have been parked for a long time. They try to go out and find these things. They try to find out who owns them, and then transport them. There's one here in New York State somewhere, I think out near Albany, where volunteers, people who love railroads and trains and that kind of stuff, work on restoring to working order, old steam engines, old diesel. I mean, diesel's
And
now
it's
old.
and it's the same thing, Adam. Think of like a art museum, right? Most art museums, if they're serious, they're going to have a restoration place,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah,
they're going to
that's
get
true.
art that needs to be restored,
Right.
right? Or like like old video, right? Old TV stuff, right? You're going to get reels from decades and decades ago that need to be modernized. They need to be digitized. They need to be each frame needs to be gone through and the scratches need to be erased, right? And maybe they need to brighten the colors up. So I guess that is, I guess, like, to your point, I don't think people think of that when they think of a museum. They think kind of the exhibit part of it.
Right.
But there is also, I think now that you mention that, there's a huge, you know, section of the museum you don't see, right, where they actually take in something that's old, right, and they refurbish it or make parts for it or restore it, right, and that's part of the museum as well. So I guess
So
making these extra parts for these computers is somewhere along those lines, right?
yes, so having those available to those kind of people would be certainly helpful. If, but also they need to be interested in these machines as part of what they're going to restore. But certainly having the parts helps that, right?
Yeah.
If they look out, say, well, is it even possible to restore one of these things? Now granted, some of the things that they're trying to restore are much older,
Mm-hmm.
they look out into the world and says, well, I can just still go on eBay and get one of these things, you know, maybe no one's yet serious about, oh, well, you can't do that. You can only find non-working things. And then you have to start looking for parts to, and then you run into, oh, well, there's this proprietary SCLD chip. What chance do I have?
Well, I've heard some folks say that that has gone bad. In my personal experience fixing 2016, I don't think I've ever seen the SCLD bad, right? It's always been something else. So, I mean, there's that, right? I mean, it is highly integrated, and I mean, unless you put 10 volts on the 5-volt line into it, I think it's probably pretty robust. I don't know what micron size they were making back then, and but it's going to be huge, right, compared to what they're doing now. So the silicon migration thing is a concern, but it's a less of a concern the older you go back, because the line widths that they were making those chips in were so big, right, that it would take maybe 40-50 years for something like that to actually fail. Because I kind of bring that up because I'm a big I like Casio watches, right? I mean, or Casio, pocket computers, Casio watches, and some of those things are starting to get that silicon rot, right? So that the actual chip that they used in the watch just doesn't function anymore because the silicon migration has destroyed or shorted out parts of the die, and so it's just like it's real, but it does
Well,
take a long time to happen.
Well, I think just saying it takes a very long time. I mean, people said this, 40 years ago, and now here we are.
Mm.
It's supposed to last the lifetime of the thing. Well, now that's great until you're trying to restore it after
Right.
its quote lifetime. So I think, if you want to say it's a duty or whatever, or at least what we could do contribute to this, right, is let's capture that knowledge so that when someone says, oh, we can't get all the replacement parts we could get or have suffered silicon migration and none of them are any good, you just go draw down this file and go make a new one, right? Of course, that's a whole other discussion of file formats and longevity of that kind of thing, but we can do that another time.
Luckily for the Timex, I don't think the SCLD would be that difficult to reverse engineer. Obviously they did it for the Portugal one, but at the end of the day, the SLD is just a homologation of discrete components, right? That they would have had to use anyway, and probably they did in their prototypes, but once they got the design down, they said, well, now let's put all this into one chip, right, to save us cost. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things in there that we would just have to figure out. The bank enable line, for instance, comes from this line and this line. So, when this line's high and this line's low, bank enable goes low. It's not a really difficult thing, I think, personally. I mean, to some layperson, it probably is impossible. You don't even think about coming up with a design to replicate that. But anybody that's in that kind of design language, they do logic design, the SLD, I think, is pretty simple, because it's from an earlier time, right? It's not like one of these, like a cell phone chip, right? It's got the modem in it. I mean, no, there's no way you could do that, in a FPGA. It's just, that's a very, very complicated design. Whereas I think the SLD is something that's, is just really simple because it came from, the early 80s, which things weren't that complicated back then.
Ingo, can I oh, hang on, Jeff. Ingo, you're going to be in a situation where you have to make some decisions about your stuff.
Yep.
So you're thinking about this right now, right?
Definitely. I mean, I'm following along the conversation, and everybody's making a lot of really good points. Pros and cons of museums versus virtualization, emulation, everything else. I've been kind of just quietly thinking about it while you guys are talking. And it's almost like rather than necessarily just I really love what Ryan said about, trying to save the knowledge of the thing, right? So like if there was a not necessarily maybe open source, but definitely like a restoration project, right? Or a preservation project where you could keep digital forms of schematics, 3D models for 3D printing, so you could have boards made, uh, any logic that could make an FPGA or CPLD that replicates the original chips wherever possible. But that's like the real challenge. And so with all the stuff that I've collected, I collected it with the goal of just wanting to satisfy an itch to play with stuff that I never got to play with when I couldn't afford it when I was younger. But also to learn about them and hopefully document it in blog posts or YouTube videos or something. Um, I think at some point, once I've either had a chance to play with them or before they really go bad or before I croak and my poor spouse is stuck with them, I should get them someplace where they could be, kept, preserved, used, whether it's in a museum or, a user group that still, cares for these things, just like all of you guys, right? All of us with the old Timex computers, we still have an interest, we take care of them, we're preserving all the documentation, the software. Um, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's no easy answer for all this.
Yeah.
Well, technically there is. So yeah, no, so I've been collecting stuff for quite a while. And then I have a building here in Columbus, which is basically the Sprawl Technology Library, which is kind of modeled on, or will be modeled on, because I'm still working on the building, will be modeled on like Paul Allen's Living Computer Museum, if any of you guys went to that. But the basic idea is that like the machines would be functional, or at least as much as we can make machines that are functional that people can come and actually play with. So I've got a friend of mine here in Columbus who helps me out. Usually every Wednesday we get together in the evening after his work, and we putter around for like 6 or 7 hours and work on rebuilding stuff. We've recently rebuilt, speaking of NCR, a couple of old NCR machines that were essentially the PC and the PC XT version of them. And so on some level, like stuff like that, the older it is, until you get to 1980, before 1980, it gets complicated because of the wire wrap and other techniques that were used back in those days. From 1980 through about 1990, repairing stuff I find is at least sort of easier, because like with these machines, we don't use the original power supplies. We don't have that kind of time. We basically take a semi-modern ATX power supply, wire it in, rearrange things so that, the power gets to where it needs to go. And then we move on and fix the rest of the machine, which usually requires a little more effort. With things that are more like a single board system, like the Timex Sinclairs, TI-99s and stuff like that, it gets a lot harder because now you are like on a board searching for components that may not have left any mark that they died, and you got to go hunting around on the board to actually figure out what component has died. So, and that's again where like being able to find schematics, being able to find information, or running across somebody who knows the machine, knows how to fix it, or worked on it at some point or another. That's where that stuff would be really useful. But I can say that at this point, there's the website at the moment is there, and I'm working on a bunch of different parts of it, but the building, like I said, hopefully will be open next year in some form or another. There will at least be my 2068 in there from the Timex clan. With I'm hoping to put the Airco disk interface back on it and get that up and running, but that's been sitting around in parts for so long that I'm not sure how that will go. But anyway, so there are other museums that are not on the scale of the California History or the Computer History Museum, but are essentially private museums. One I visited recently was the Large Scale Systems Museum in just east of or northeast of Pittsburgh, New Kensington, I think. And that's a guy named Dave McGuire who collects all of the really, really big iron. But he also has a bunch of other stuff there. And he's got a ZX80 and a variety of Sinclairs, also mostly on display. I don't remember that he had any Sinclairs actually out for playing with. But he's also got an actual museum. He has no real staff like most of us who are doing sort of private museums. We take people if they show up and if they can help, but for the most part, we're doing it on our own. And so, like, you know, his hours are kind of like you have to send him email, and if he's got time, he'll let you in and you can go poke around or do things. They're often there on weekends regularly, so it's more of a like it's often open weekend afternoons, but even that is there's no official schedule for his museum and stuff like that. So there's a variety of smaller entities like me and like him that are kind of sprinkled throughout the United States. Generally, most of them don't specialize in one particular kind of computer. It's more of a general thing where we want samples of everything if we can get it so that people can experience the whole broad range. But obviously, each of us worked on or worked with specific computers that we really enjoy and are interested in. So that's, I mean, if you go poking around, and of course there's the VC Fed, which is an overarching organization that sort of covers the vintage computer space entirely at this point in some form or another. VCF Midwest is coming up next month. And if anybody happens to be in the Chicago area, I hope to see you there. I will be there again. And that's another place where I don't remember the name of the guy who always brings like a large group of Sinclair stuff and usually has a table, and he's got an entire display stand of Timex Sinclair stuff. Though he does not have an Airco disk interface. And he's talked to me about it a couple of times, but we've never quite hooked up on the thing where I would bring it and he could add it for the weekend to his display. But we'll see if that happens at some point. But so, I mean, establishing a museum in and of itself, it requires money. It requires some, serious drive for organization and things like that. Collecting the information, that requires a repository, which to some extent you already have because David's already set that up for where to put the information. And, that's something there. Emulating it is probably a really cool idea. And, will allow the machine itself the code and stuff to live on long beyond the life of the hardware. As we agree, eventually it will die, just based on the laws of physics. So, I mean, I think that's probably kind of a summary of the different options that there are. And you know, it's kind of a matter of like probably doing at least 2 of the 3 would be a good idea, because you never really want to have all your eggs in one basket.
I
Yeah,
think
because who knows, a place your basket could burn down, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think the preservation should be, you know, the initial focus of like, okay, making the time capsule, if you will, so that you could reach in and just look. If I want to recreate it, either in emulation, I mean that's out there, or reproduce the boards. Maybe I don't, you know, obviously necessarily have a reproduction case, so I have a physical reproduction, but a working reproduction. So I think there's working reproductions, and then there's the artifact, right? So the artifacts are going to age. The real actual artifacts are going to age because that's just the way that works. And that's probably why a lot of displays, you know, they'll recreate things because the actual item is so precious. You don't want to have that necessarily on display. You're going to have, maybe have some reproduction on display. Certainly if you're going to have a place where people could use things, you like to be able to just spin up one and put on the display and people can hammer away at that. That's fine. So to me, that step of, okay, preserving it so that you can create those at will, a working replica of some description, and all that information.
Sorry,
Right.
I didn't want to step on you there, Ryan. But the other thing too is that, you know, as more and more of these things start to be made of unobtainium, the people that would love to have the opportunity to play with one of these machines may never ever be able to have the means to get their hands on them, whether or not they're falling apart or not. And then there's also, you know, what about computer science, you know, students or you know, programmers, developers, tinkerers that would love to, you know, learn from this older technology and how it evolved into today's technology, right? Having access and having a preservation, a time capsule of that stuff, but where you could also build from it, create your own, or fork off of that project and create something completely different, you know, a what if. My brother and I are kind of doing that with our Kilo Z project. We're staying true to the original ZX81 TS1000, with the exception of adding the things that we really wanted to have at that time when it came out. Like we wanted a better keyboard, so we made a better keyboard. We're not the only ones to do that, but you know, and I just put a 32K RAM expansion on it, and now I just added the ZX Westby on it, and so it's in a bigger case to fit the keyboard. But I mean, it's still essentially a ZX81 TS1000, and if I were to take the plans and a new ULA and a bunch of other stuff, I mean, these could be made in any quantities today, and it's still a ZX81 or TS1000. And 20 years from now, I think somebody could still do that. The trickiest part, I think, is the reverse engineering of some of these chips that are no longer in production, cannot be obtained in mass, and would have to be reverse engineered, right? And some of the circuit boards that are not just 2-layer boards, right, would be very difficult without schematics, would be very, very difficult to reverse engineer, but it's possible. And so if there's enough people with an interest that could create a team to attack that and make that a project, right, then that information could all be put online where anybody could have access to it. And even like with that ULA project, right? Maybe we could agree with that individual to set up like a trust that says, hey, as long as you're making money on this thing, we're not going to release it to the public, but you know, as soon as you give us the green light or you pass it, you don't have any errors or whatever, then this goes into the public domain and everyone can have access to program their own either FPGA or CPLD to be that ULA. And then for eternity, people should be able to build any version of a ZX81 if they wanted to.
We can create the TS Pico from 3 countries, US, Argentina, and where is
New Zealand?
the New Zealand, right? Correct. That is
There's-
perfect to work, yeah, remotely.
There's
in
the
specific-
Pico 2 now.
Yeah. Jeff, or was it Paul? Somebody said something about the Jeff.
Yeah.
You said something about the MyArc.
Yeah. So, okay, in the early 1990s, Barry Miller, who was real active in the Texas Instruments community, and once we kind of saw our MyArc go out of business, we were like, oh, the writing's on the wall. So he started to set up a fund, and we each pitched in so much money or whatever. And at that time, there may be 200 of us MyArc users. And so we bought the rights to the MyArc Geneve disk operating system. And now there's only about 3 active MyArc Geneve users because I sold mine years ago.
What is that?
What's that?
What is that?
Okay, so
Geneve.
when the TI-99 stopped production, MyArc came out with the 9640. So the TI was known for the expansion, the big silver.
Yeah, the huge box.
Well, this was a card that went in it. So it was like it was supposed to be the IBM killer. So it's kind of like MS-DOS. It had 640K, 12 megahertz, 3-phase processor. It had 9938, I think.
Okay, so an obscure add-on for an obscure add-on, kind of.
Well, but it was really cool at the time.
I'm not saying it wasn't cool. I'm just wondering what it was.
But you're right. You're right. It wasn't really well known.
Yeah.
And so, but with that foresight to buy the rights to it, we have the source code from it. So they're still doing updates to the MyArc Geneve disk operating system. They found bugs from like 40 years ago, whatever. So there's still the couple maintainers of the operating system are still putting out bug fixes. They're still trying to get the TI-99 games to run on it, because the API is different. The hooks that it took to read from the actual TI differ from the Geneve. And, but it was just kind of neat that this guy was smart enough to go, hey, let's go ahead and we got the expertise. We've got the communication with the writer of the operating system. Let's go ahead and pool our money, make him an offer, say, hey, for 10 grand, can we buy the rights to it or whatever? And even me, I just kind of lurk in the TI group. I really don't do much with it anymore, but just kind of read what neat things they're doing, and a couple, 3 people are still passionate about keeping that MyArc Geneve, because you're right, nobody really knows about it. You mentioned Texas Instruments, but what came after the TI-99 was pulled from the market, nobody really knows. And you look at the specs of the Geneve, it's like, well, that's pretty cool. Didn't know about it, And it's just kind of one of those things. And like the comment was made for even STEM. So like we have Sideport and Shreveport, and some of the exhibits that were donated, they kind of like fell out of disuse, and they're always trying to revamp it. So some of the museums, I don't know as far as actually keeping it retro computers kind of alive and actually being in use for the public to actually kind of go through. So some sort of STEM thing in the summer at the library, public library or something, just to bring a couple of these old computers and say, hey, you give a talk or whatever, and bring in a couple of these small computers, hook them up to your TV, say this is the way it used to be with a cassette recorder, or, even with the TS Pico now, save and kind of say, this kind of cuts down your load time or whatever, just kind of demonstrate. And I don't know, just somehow kind of pool, the resources we've got to kind of keep it alive, even in little bits or whatever. It may pay off in the long run, get somebody interested in electronics or whatever,
I want to pull a couple threads that y'all have mentioned. One, Carl, you mentioned old cars, and I know that near me they do a thing called cars and coffee and cars, whatever it is. They gather in a mall parking lot and show off their old cars and their new terrible cars. And that that with a dwindling number of folks in the, sort of in the Timex community, like you said, we might have to team up with, I don't know, Commodore people to have a community, virtual community. um there's 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 a parallel that has been going on in the stamp collecting world since the 80s at least, right? Because that was when I started started collecting stamps and started reading the stamp newspapers and stuff. And they back then were, the constant hand wringing about, we've got to figure out ways to bring young people into the hobby. It's like, well, you know what? If your hobby's not interesting to people, that's fine. That's cool. Eventually stamp collecting may die out. And we're kind of in a similar situation, although we're not doing hand wringing about bringing young people into the Timex hobby. But certainly what you said, Jeff, of go out and do a demo once in a while, show those young whippersnappers how hard it was and how we had to walk uphill 5 miles through the snow even in the middle of the summer.
Jeff said something that we take for granted. Like if we were to bring and have like a demo of, say, our Timex computer and just showed up and first thing we brought in was a CRT TV. Like if you had like young kids there, they'd be like, well, what the hell is that? And do we even think of that? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Adam. There's some group of people who make videos with really young kids, like kids that are like 12 and under, with old technology. So there's a video of them trying to use a rotary phone and they
I've
no
seen those kind
clue,
of videos.
right?
Yeah, I know
All
what you
right,
mean.
or use a Walkman, right? Even a Walkman. And the other thing that I want to mention is, I don't know that we need to really fully duplicate the SCLD, because the work that Jeff Burrell did, where he took an existing library for the Pico, this VGA output library, and then he wrote software to sit and watch the 2068 memory, and a couple ports, the couple important ports for switching, whether it's medium res or high resolution or whatever. And so he recreated the video generation portion of the SCLD, within a Pico, and that code is available. It's on GitHub. So then that leaves us, the parts that are not video of the SCLD, the bank switching, the talking to the audio chip, a couple other small functions. Those would be a lot easier to figure out than, what are all the gates that went into making the video portion happen. One of the questions I have is how do we capture that knowledge, right? For instance, Carl, well, hang on just a second, Gustavo. Carl, you've posted a lot about repairing some 2068s, especially for Ryan, and all of the stuff that you did, right? And there's an even larger body of knowledge in that particular regard for the Spectrum, right? You can go on Facebook, you can go on any number of websites and say, my Spectrum is doing this. You can post a picture of this, of the screen, and 4 people will jump in and say, do A, B, C, and D, right? Try this, that, and the other thing, and you'll get to a solution eventually. If I power up a dead 2068 and it shows me, white and black bars, I don't know what that means. Could be memory, could be, a couple logic chips, who knows what. And, really it boils down to replace everything starting from left to right, all the standard TTL starting from left to right, I mean, but there are some troubleshooting measures, right? Like there are things that are obvious if the Z80 is, tits up. There are things that are maybe less obvious where the memory is gotten destroyed or whatever. But how do we capture all that, right? How do we capture that? How do we preserve that in a way that is findable? I mean, that to me is one of the biggest challenges is having that information is one thing, having it be findable is a real big problem. You know, people don't know about archive.org. You know, people don't know. I didn't know that Mowgli, you had a website, and I certainly don't know the URL. Please put it in the chat. You know, people just don't know, and it's hard to find, right? So where do you put things that people can find them? Okay, I'm done ranting. Gustavo, go ahead.
No, no, okay. No, just only to explain more deeper the Chef solution for the VGA TS-Pico solution. Chef interface in his proprietary board, not proprietary as a specific electronic development, okay? Capture the process that the SCLD of Timex get the info of the video and then create. And the work of Chef is recreate the format of the video in the VGA format. Inside the SCLD, Timex creates the video as a video compositive format, plus the RGB outputs, okay? But the RGB outputs is especially only to extract the bits from the memory. That is the easy part of the logic. And then the rest is port decoding and also a simple gates inside the SCLD. This is not any impossible decoding options. Okay, it's easy to decode the SCLD.
Okay. Well, and yet we have not done that.
No, yes, I agree, but I can decode all the SCLD because I create the program. I need to recoding in C.
Right.
Okay, I decode full the SCLD. For me, it's not a secret. Yeah.
So yeah, so you have that, Gustavo, and you know, but you have that. And how do we, you know, how do we preserve that information? How do we make it available? And
no, okay.
findable.
The idea is to document. Yes, no, the idea is my document. When mentioned in the previous calls, for example, when I put in the public use of my TPI ROM, okay, I not document yet, except the document I share with you regarding the protocol specs.
Right.
That is one of the first step to document the work. Okay, because the rest of the project is not documented because it's in my head. When I create the original, yeah, when you use a computer and put the hands in the keyboard, you type, okay? But in my case, I not use a document to create the program. First, I create the program and then document. I don't know, for me, it's easy to program in C or in any language. I don't need any specific document that explain the process of the program. I can program, that's it, okay, as a talk.
Well, kind of like Ingo was saying,
Yeah.
you know, I think we need to start a project, right? So, I mean, if we're going to make a TS2068 North America SCLD project, you know, we need to set that, you know, probably GitHub would be the good place for it, but, you know, we need to start gathering the information that we do know, because obviously they reverse engineered the PAL one, and a lot of the PAL is going to be relevant to ours, right? I mean, you don't want to try and, you know, work smarter, not harder, right? And try and leverage some of his information if he's willing to divulge it. That's the other part of it, right? Because some folks, you know, rightfully don't want to do that because, you know, they just don't, or they, you know, they have a lot of time and effort into it. But like I did say, you know, I don't think it's that difficult to probably reverse engineer that. But I'm not an FPGA guy or a CPLD guy. You know, I don't make those chips, so I'm not really sure what kind of, you know, information would need to go into that. I mean, other than the fact that, you know, I've got these inputs into the SCLD and I've got these outputs of the SCLD, and these are the inputs that affect these outputs, right? And then that kind of gives you a truth table or a logic table, right, that you can create in the FPGA to do that, right? And so that's kind of one piece of it. But, you know, you do have the video part of it, which is not really analog, but, you know, I think it's more digital stuff, but it's, you know, I think that's probably pretty well understood, and we should be able to easily reverse engineer that. There's the memory, right? Another thing the SCLD is the memory, so that the CPU and the SCLD can look at the video memory without colliding each other, right? Without clobbering each other, right? So kind of tells the CPU, hey, wait, I'm reading the memory, which is not the way the ZX81 did, right? Luckily with the ZX81, we had the ZX80, which was all discrete. So we can kind of really get an idea of what they did with the ZX81 of combining all that discrete logic into a ULA, right? So we don't have that with the Spectrum. We don't have that with the Timex 2068. But at least on the Spectrum, like I said, there's other people that have reverse engineered those already. And so, it may be something that we could, hey, would you be interested in helping us, figure out the Timex Sinclair 2068's SCLD? And it may just be a matter of getting these people a machine that they can, I don't know how they're reverse engineering these, but, kind of in my mind, I think you'd probably have a logic analyzer you hook up to some of these pins, right? And you run the machine and you record what it's doing, and then you can kind of isolate which pins you want, and then you can figure it out, right? You can get a truth table from that. But anyway, that's kind of just, the preservation part of it. I think the SOD has to be kind of a pretty, high priority, because that's really the only part of the 2068 or even the 1500 for that matter that's proprietary, right? And because the Z80, the memory, the ROMs, the sound chip, all that's just general chips, right? That we can get. But the SCLD is one that we kind of need to, get reverse engineered, at least so that we can create something that'll do the same thing. And then we'll be on the way to, prolonging the life of the 2068. Because the other thing too is, I don't know if anybody's had a 3D. I've been looking at this Creality, the 3D scanner thing, and I haven't got one, but I wasn't going to use it for the Timex, but I'm thinking it could be used for that. Somebody could get a Timex case and take the keyboard overlay off, take the keyboard out, and actually maybe use something like a 3D scanner to scan that case, so we can try another thing, right? That I think is kind of high on the list, is to get a 3D replica of the Timex case, right? Because we don't really have one of those now. I mean, so that's, where the Spectrum cases, somebody's got tons of those, right? They actually inject mold those, but like I said, there's so many of those that were out there back in the UK that there's some market for that. I don't think there's really a big market for the 2068, but it would be nice to at least have a 3D model of that thing, so that we can either, say down the line, we come up with the SCLD, and let's say, oh, well, now we know what the SCLD is like. What if we made a new 2068 board and we can add some functionality to this SCLD of our own, right? You see what I'm saying? So now we could make a PCB that would go into this case, or we could even change the design of the case slightly, or make it so it can take a regular keyboard. But once you have the basis of the design, then it's easier to modify. Right now we don't have nothing. So it's
yeah. And
Yeah, I mean, I think
there
go
was
ahead.
somebody on the email list who asked about, whether the 2068 board had ever been revised and stuff. And mentioned the many jumper wires and stuff. And certainly,
No, that was just recently, a couple days ago. Someone
yeah,
said
exactly,
that.
right.
Yeah.
And that is that's a thing that could come out of what you're talking about, Carl. Is we have a schematic. We don't know how accurate the schematic is to the reality, but that's definitely a thing in terms of documentation towards preservation. I had a question.
David, you would know this. You said that, but like, you scanned in many, many, many newsletters. I'm sure this must have all come up over the years in the newsletters. Like, are these schematics accurate? Or people like, hey, look at this schematic. This isn't right? Look at, I've got this bodge wire here. Like, do you know? Like, did they talk about that kind of stuff?
I've seen references to suggest that the schematic's not accurate. Ingo, you have your hand up.
Does anybody have the Sam's photo fax?
Sorry, Paul, what?
Does anybody have the Sam's photo fax?
Yeah, it's on the archive.org.
That was taken from a real machine. That was not copied from Timex. They
Okay.
reverse engineered it in order to create the photo fax.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So that's good to know. How about you, Ingo?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking while we've been talking now is that there on the Timex Sinclair forums, right? There are a lot of people that have made a lot of posts on a lot of different topics. There's a wealth of information, but it's scattered all over the place. And there's a very large number of users, very active users that aren't part of this group. And, maybe we just need to get a little mind melding going on and maybe hit up some of the people on that forum and say, hey, what would it take to kind of consolidate all that information and all these different posts and all these different, discussions, right? And maybe even get some of those people to help collaborate on this, you know, mass store of information, right? On what it would take to recreate in various different forms, right? Like if you wanted to be absolutely period correct, what would you have to do? And then from there to an emulation, right? And then maybe even a modded version, right? Different modded versions. But I mean, all that could be put into one or more various repositories with 3D models, without 3D models, and I think it'd be great because then it doesn't fall on any one person or one group's shoulders to keep this stuff accessible for anybody in the future that might benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that one of the things we need to start doing is making sure, or at least hooking up with existing presences at some of these retro computer fairs. Because we know that they have more than just all Commodores there or whatever, right? And that we shouldn't show up. No, there's other things represented, and but there's not any one Timex fair, and there never will be, right? So we need to be present at these things in some form. And I know so far it's kind of ad hoc. And what's his name was describing? There's a guy at I forget which one it was. He's got a display, but we don't. I don't know that we've. He's not a part of this group, as far as I know.
And I think that's another part of like pre-retirement and post-retirement. I think post-retirement, you kind of have more time and maybe, enough money to go to these events. I mean, I kind of would like to go to one, but again, I would have to schedule it, take time off from work, a lot, right? And the travel time and everything, because there's nothing here in Albuquerque. I'd have to go to, I don't know, something in Texas or California, something closer to me. But then you're talking about stuff in Ohio or, on the East Coast, and that's kind of even further, right? So more time and more money that it would take me to go there. Plus, if I'm going to bring things, that's a whole, that's another step above, right? Because that's not stuff I really would want to carry on. Maybe I would need to have it shipped, right, or something like that, where I could at least if it gets destroyed, I would get some money back maybe from it if I insured it.
Well, that's the beauty of our group. I think that we've got maybe the Southwest sector handled.
Yeah, Texas. I think there's one in maybe Colorado, up in Denver, right? I think there's a VCF in Denver, maybe.
Not that I've heard. So the one in
I don't think so.
Southwest is in Texas.
Okay.
And then there's the one that is hosted by the Computer History Museum, which is west. And those are the two, as far as I know, they're closest to you. I do not know of one in Colorado. I kind of listed them in the chat, the ones that I do know about.
Okay.
And there's the one in the LA area, right?
It's not a VCF as far as I know. I mean, there are other computer festivals that are not associated with the VC Fed and are not Vintage Computer Fest, and then a direction kind of things. And I'm not clear on exactly like how people are using VCF anyway, because there's Vintage Computer Fest Europe, which was supposed to be in the spring, but they moved it to the same weekend that Midwest is happening next month. And then in October, I'm hoping to make it to Vintage Computer Fest Berlin, because I'll be over there at that point. And they also are using Vintage Computer Fest, but I'm not sure they're at all associated with the Vintage Computer Federation. And I think they're just using that as a generic name. Most of the
Yeah, I
other
think
smaller festivals, so the ones that I know of are Cocoa Fest in Chicago and Tandy Assembly here in Springfield, Ohio, for those respective specific computers.
yeah, the
Well,
VCF SoCal is actually, it says here, a Vintage Computer Federation partner show.
Okay, that's one I did not know about. Thank you.
and I think there is something in Denver, but it may not be a VC, maybe one of the other things. But, again, it just boils down to a coordination, okay, who else is going to go? Luckily here in Albuquerque, there's 3 of us, right? So, I mean, potentially we could all 3 go to one of these things and just really like, what the hell are these Timex people doing here? There's 3 of them, and, but the other part is, like I said, shipping the equipment there, because I would certainly want to show some things there, right? Get a table, show some things, especially some of the more rare things, I think, that most people don't see, at least in person. So, it's just, I think if you're retired, you have more flexibility with that, right? As opposed to still working for the man, so to speak. So, I mean, it's not impossible, but it would just, it's not really something really high on my priority list to go to one of these things. I'd love to, I mean, I think it would be great to, meet up with these folks. There's a lot of other YouTube channels that I watch that, like Adrian Black, for instance, or even, the 8-bit guy, which I think they, most of those guys are back kind of in the eastern part of the country. So they go to those BCFs over there. But, I think it'd be kind of cool to meet those guys, and shoot the spit with them, so to speak. And, because, and maybe educate them on some of the Timex stuff, because I know they've done some Timex stuff videos, but, they obviously don't know that, they didn't grow up with them. They didn't use them. They're just kind of showing them.
So you're saying
And,
they're all like me, like
well,
I
at
think
least
what
you're using it now.
yeah, I am
I
using
think
it. Yeah.
I think what Carl is saying, we need to go bless some hearts.
Well, I think it needs some representation from some people that were there using them back, when they were, being bought and used. So I think, a lot of these people just cover it because it's content, right? So they'll draw some people to their channel. But like I said, when I see the 8-bit guys coverage of the Timex computers and Adrian's, they do okay. But like I said, it's obvious that they don't know. They didn't use these things. So I mean, not to say that what they're saying, some of it is kind of incorrect, but I think it would be a service to those guys, or even if we make some videos ourselves, since we are users of these things, we know.
Yeah, I think that making the videos clearly, I watched some of those things, and it seemed to me like, no, don't send me the manual, because that would make this boring. It's better to watch me flail away on this crazy keyboard without a manual. See, that's what I think some of those do.
Yeah, that's kind of like the 2 girls, the two ladies that they do a lot of machines, right? They hook them up and they play with them. They're kind of those to me are kind of entertaining, because they're kind of flailing, like you said. They don't know how to use these things, and especially the Timex ones, right? They're like, oh, you hit one key and this whole keyword comes up. It's like, whoa, what the crap is that? And so it's like, well, how do I load things? And you look around on the keyboard for 5 minutes. Oh, there's load on the L key, right? Who would think you would have load on the L key. But anyway, you know, it's just some of that is entertaining, but I don't like it when some people kind of they misrepresent the Timex a little bit. You know, they don't because they don't know. You know, or they may say something that's not quite correct, and it's just you know, I'd like to have some, you know, factual, you know, people that we were
That's
actually
when you can
there. We
start
know.
a flame war in their chat. You know?
Well, you know, again, it's just all boils down to time, right? And if I was retired and I really made it my heart's goal to do this kind of stuff, yeah, I'd you know, probably be doing it 8 hours a day.
So I think what I can see here though is maybe an extension of some of the videos you and Adam have done in the sense, and not just with you and Adam, but like the group, right? So
Mm-hmm.
to put out some of these videos that are maybe a bit more definitive, and then you know we can sit around making them a little bit more scripted so they can be a little focused, and you know have some that are more informative than just entertainment of, hey, I hope I don't blow this up fixing it.
You know, one idea that we could have, one idea we could do is something like Carl was saying, and the 2068 came with the book, but it also came with the cassette that has like a typing tutor on it. And as boring as that video might be, like use it for 5 minutes and say, this is how the keyboard works. You know, like I have a video, it's like one of my most watched videos, and it's something boring, and it's how to set up the emulator for the Bailey Astrocade. And it's just a simple thing that people would want to do. It's not entertaining, but it's useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like maybe a repair series on a 2068 or a 1000, you know, just from the US perspective.
Yes.
You know, stuff like that of, okay, here we go. We got a dead machine. I have no idea what's wrong with it or what it even does. You know, let's plug it in, you know, turn it on, see what happens. And then you kind of just go from there, right? To how you're troubleshooting. You know, again, troubleshooting to me is kind of a personal thing, right? I mean, everybody troubleshoots similarly, but everybody has their little quirks, right? It's
Well,
just your personal thing.
But you know, Carl, for a lot of folks, they don't know how to do that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
they have no knowledge whatsoever.
But also, I think it's not going into this troubleshooting blind though, where I literally know zero about this machine.
Yeah.
I'm going to poke at it and then hope it doesn't blow up. It's no, I'm going to go at it with documentation and knowledge so that the end result is informative.
Yeah.
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 Or, you know, even just to open the thing up and say, okay, let's take a look at this. You know, what's this chip do? What are these chips for? You know, just to give somebody in a video format a lay of the land, so to speak, of the 2068's board, right, and all the parts on it and how they work together. And you know, I think that would be. I mean, it certainly would have been informative back in the 80s, but you know, I don't know how informative it would be today. But
they
you
used
know,
to
it
sell
would just be
tapes
content.
like that in the 80s. I don't know if you guys remember that, but you could buy VHS tapes that would have like, this is for the IBM world, but you could buy like a tape that would explain how to like look at your motherboard and things like that.
Well, and Tab put out these books about how to, you know, repair your computers. Of course, the Tab books were about 50% incorrect, you know, half the
Really?
Oh, they're terrible.
Many people put out books on how to build your own PC or repair your own PC. But in a lot of cases, that was because the PC was essentially a modular platform.
Yeah.
Where literally, and it, you know, so that's where like the single board stuff, like the Timex and the TI-99 and other things like that, those were a lot harder to do that sort of thing with. And you know, there wasn't a lot of that I saw documentation, other than some of the stuff we've already covered on how to repair or add things to your Timex Sinclair.
Well, at least it would be great to show off my. Well, it's actually Ryan's. I'm, I guess, permanently borrowing it, but it's the 2068 that I have that I fully socketed everything. Even the SCLD's is in the socket, so that's the troubleshooting machine.
Which is amazing to me because I got that at a thrift store for probably a couple bucks decades ago. with the idea that it was dead and it was just a parts machine to fix my computer in the future. And then Carl fixes both of them.
Well, like I said, the SLDs, in my experience, rarely go bad, and all the other chips are replaceable, right? I mean, you can still get them. So
That was my point about preserving the SCLD functionality in whatever way we do
right,
now before they actually do melt away, whatever.
right.
Yeah. Greg mentioned about an hour ago or half an hour ago, I don't know how long it was, that the Spectrum Next is, a very flexible platform, and the folks who developed that have developed various, I don't know, whatever the word is, modules or versions, that things that you can run on it. Right?
Cores.
Cores. Thank you. That's the word.
Hey, did they ever make speaking of that, did they have made a 2068 core?
Well, and that's where I'm going is,
okay.
Alvin joined us months ago, and we talked a little bit about that. And he's, he mentioned in our meeting that, that's at least on his radar, and he's reasonably, involved in that project. I don't know. I haven't checked in a while. I don't know if there's a 2068 core yet.
Yeah. I know when I first because I got the first Next, right?
Yeah.
When they first had it. And, I played with it for a couple of months, but, they had limited cores. But like I said, there was not a 2068 core there. And I know I checked, a year or two later, and they still hadn't had a 2068 core. So I don't know if they, have one now, but.
Right.
I have a version 2. It doesn't have a 2068.
Yeah, I kind of figured that they didn't, that's kind of low on their priority list, right? Because like I said, how many 26.8s did they make? And that was it. Let's say they made 200, let's say they made 250,000 of them.
Right.
And that's it, right? That.
Well, and Adam mentions in the chat that it's pretty rare. There's actually, in theory, it's an open source project. There's a guy that makes them as, like, I think it's called the Ngo. He's somewhere in Europe, either Spain or Italy or something, a Spanish or Italian language country. And Superfo, who is based here in the United States, has also made his version called, I think it's called an Xberry Pi or something like that, which is just a little circuit board that you hook up a real keyboard to and a real monitor and etc. It's just a very tiny thing, but it is the core. It uses the same core.
So wait, that thing becomes a Spectrum Next? That Raspberry Pi thing?
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
yeah, I'll have to look it up. But yeah, there's a Facebook group for it. He posts on about it. People have questions about hooking up joysticks and whatever, and he's reasonably actively developing that thing. So.
Well, but I want to make sure that people understand that what makes the Spectrum Next is the FPGA, right? So if you put that into a Pico, you're it's not going to be hardware equivalent, right? I mean, it's kind of an emulation, whereas the FPGA that the Spectrum Next uses is hardware accurate, right? It's kind of like the Mister,
yeah,
right? Where they actually look at it recreates the hardware from these machines, down to a clock frequency accurate, all the transitions and everything, so everything works exactly the way it did in the real hardware, right? Whereas if you did that on a Pi, you're kind of emulating that, so that's not going to exist, right? The hardware, the timings won't be exact. But then again, a lot of things probably don't need that, right? I'm sure there's probably some things that do, but I think the majority of the software that were on these things don't need hardware accurate stuff like that. It's just when you're putting accessories onto it, like the expansion bus, right? I don't know how that Pico handles the expansion bus, so I could plug in a 2040 printer, right, or one of these disk drive systems. How would that work? I don't know.
Right, you need level shifters.
Right.
You need TTL to drive the expansion bus.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, and that's where the timing gets more, you have to have more accurate timing there, because if things get out of sync, who knows what'll happen. But anyway.
Yeah. This is one of the instances where I'm really glad that Zoom's meeting summarization thing is working, because after this meeting, I'm going to get this very long email, with a summary of our stuff. And you guys have had so many great ideas and so many, good thoughts that at least it's going to be preserved in a text format, and we can, if we want to work on it, we can work on it,
And you're talking about the museum there, or just everything we've talked about?
All everything we've talked about. Yes, because it sounds to me like just this massive to-do list that that we should just tackle one by one.
Yeah,
or at least prioritize, right? These are the things we want to do, and these are things, maybe it's not such a crisis, right?
I think it's the AI thing, right? It goes through and looks at the meeting and creates a
usually
report.
it's terrible, but it's good enough.
They're getting better. Yeah,
Yes.
they're getting better.
Hey Keith, are you there?
I'm here.
So Keith, you are you're just a little tiny bit older than I am. You might be like what, 58 or something?
78.
All right. So, and have you been retired for a little bit?
19 years.
And how much of those 19 years have you dedicated to playing with your Timex?
Hardly none.
Don't tell it that way, man, because you're making it disheartening for us young men.
I used to do it when I got to work, or when I was working. I had a lot of free time, and I would play with it a lot.
Yeah.
Mostly emulators.
Okay. So, I mean, what are you going to do? You've got stuff, right?
I got lots of stuff.
I bet you do. I bet you do. I mean, that's what happens. You just collect, we accumulate stuff over the years, right?
3 printer interfaces, 4 disk drive interfaces.
Oh my gosh.
I got the Millennium K, the Larkin, and 2 Aircos. 1 4-drive Airco with 256K and 1 with 64K.
Wow. Have you thought about, I mean, and you probably have other stuff in your life, right? Give us some advice.
I was thinking about what you guys were talking about. I've got a lot of stuff and I don't know where it's going to go. My wife has no use for it. My grandkids don't want it. I might have to leave it to a museum.
Well, there's a few of us. You should copy down the information and feel free to pass that along.
I got a lot of stuff that Jack Doheny gave me also.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, see, things like that, it's like we need to set up, just in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if you want to send this stuff and preserve it or, whatever, maybe not to bash on you, David, not as bashing, but, at least that's someplace we could send it. David could get it. Granted, I know he doesn't want it, but who else are we going to send it to? And then David can kind of say, well, hey, of course, when David's gone, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's.
We've talked a lot about death in this today. Like,
well, we're all gonna die, man.
We all have a contract. That's right.
Yeah, we're all gonna die.
None of us are gonna escape that.
Like William Shatner.
I just pictured David just saying,
make great shipping.
Well, like I said,
it's saying that I'm out, I'm done, and then you're on your own.
I mean, go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say I'd love to get stuff from folks, and I mean, the thing is, because I don't really have any disk drive systems. But then again, it wouldn't be something I would use a lot. But I kind of got out of Timex, when they got out of the market. I know we kind of maybe haven't talked about this, but I think, obviously a lot of people stayed with Timex and kept using it. And then these disk drive systems came out and they got these and they enjoyed that. Once Timex kind of pulled out of the market, I was graduating high school, looking for a real job, you know, and I kind of figured in my mind that Timex was done, right? So I kind of lost interest in it at that point, and I didn't really pursue, you know, these disk drive systems that were just starting to come out. So I never really got onto that bandwagon where a lot of you guys that stuck with Timex through, you know, the later, you know, the mid late 80s, right? You got to play with all that kind of stuff because that's when all that came out. And I was onto the IBM PC by that time. So, you know, which already had disk drives.
I had no idea that Timex had gone out of business until like 3 or 4 years after it had happened.
Oh,
And
really?
somebody was like, "Oh, by the way, you know that's kind of a dinosaur." And I went, "Wait, what?" I was like, I have all the stuff that I want. I was getting it from, you know, Indianapolis and from the guy out in Oregon, and I was like, you know, all right, fine. I'm
Wow.
still.
Well, how
That's
long was
great.
the Sync magazine around? That was around to keep the community.
Sync as soon as
Yeah,
Timex
they died.
announced, they were done.
Oh,
Yep.
really?
Yes.
Yep.
So what were people forced to read then?
User group newsletters.
Yep.
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 Pretty much.
And some of
Time
those grew
Designs.
into decent newsletters.
Yeah, Time Designs was a big kind of
Time Designs,
conglomeration. Yeah.
Syncware.
And I think
Syncware was
maybe
really big.
some might have been a big one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know I kind of remember that day because I know it really hurt me that Timex was out of business. I was like, what? I just got this thing.
I lived in a very small bubble at the time, so.
I mean, I was waiting for that color computer. You know, I think my parents got it for me for Christmas. I think it actually came in around Thanksgiving, but yeah, it was. That's what 3 months maybe I had playing with that thing, and then Timex is out of business. What?
Yeah, it was on the market for 4 months. 4
Yeah,
months.
it just really I remember it physically. You know, it kind of hurt when I read that news. I was like, it's like, man, I really like this machine. You know, and that's kind of pulled the plug on it.
We have 10 minutes roughly, and I want to talk about in theory, the next Monday meeting is Labor Day, and you know, y'all should enjoy Labor Day and hot dogs and whatever. So I'm going to shift that meeting to the second Monday in September, which would be the 9th. If Labor Day is the 2nd, the 9th, I think.
Yes, that's the day after BCF Midwest.
Is it? Okay, cool. So okay, we'll get in. And then we'll stick with the 3rd Sunday in September. So it'll just sort of be back to back. The other thing is, Mowgli, you weren't here earlier when I was showing off this this scan that I sort of discovered that I had. So you will probably remember this, Mowgli, that there was a meeting, Midwest User Group meeting, in January of 1988, maybe.
Oh, that was what you sent me.
Oh, okay.
Email.
So one of the guys who attended was James DePie from the Cleveland group, the Greater Cleveland Sinclair User Group, I think it is.
Cats.
And he had a video camera, and it looks like when he got home, he took his videotape and ran it through the video digitizer device that the Smug user group had designed. So, and what he put on the cover of their January-February 1988 user group newsletter was a picture of little headshots of folks who were at this meeting. So we have at least 2 of the folks. Oh, which screen did I share? I don't want that one. Let me try getting the right one. I want just that. There we go. Cool. Okay. So top left, Mowgli.
Wow, that's awesome.
Isn't that awesome?
That's
second row, second from the left, Paul Holmgren.
Yep.
Okay. we talked about Gary Ginger at our last meeting, I think. He's all the way on the right on the third row. The two guys on the right in the second row were involved in publishing Sinkware News. The guy to the left of Paul is Frank Davis, who Paul had a business with. I'm trying to think who else in here.
So that's
Second from the left on the top row is
Donald Guess.
Donald Guess, right? Who was part of your group, Mowgli.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then to the right of him was Maggie
Says Maggie Stewart. Okay.
And Dave Zimmerman, who was running our group, is not pictured, which I'm not sure why.
That's what it says. Not pictured. James.
Yeah, I don't know why he was there. I don't know why they didn't get a picture of him, because he was kind of hard to miss sometimes. But yeah.
And bottom row, second from the left, is a guy named Ed Radke, who passed away a few years ago, and a huge collection of his stuff ended up on eBay. I don't know why I recognize that. I remember seeing it on eBay at one point. So anyway, I thought that was amusing.
That is pretty cool. I have a question about that. So each one of those at some point, just those face headshots were displayed separately and probably saved to a tape somewhere. Like,
yeah, that would be my guess. Because I don't know if James DePie had a floppy disk system or just tape, but this was we've talked about this more than a year ago. This little circuit board that these guys in Milwaukee, I think that's what the M stands for, user group came up with, and there are multiple examples of scans in these newsletters of this. Like Tim's left us, but Tim mentioned a guy named Toby. What was his last? Paul, are you still here? What was Toby's last name?
Radliff.
Yeah. So Toby was known for being a character in American Splendor. It was a comic book a long time ago. And then some of us before we knew about the American Splendor thing, he was on some show on MTV. I don't remember what the show was, but he was on some bizarre show on MTV. And he was from the Cleveland user group. There's a picture of him out there if you want to go dig for it.
Maybe we should start up like a video thing to yo Timex Sinclair raps.
Okay, so that's going to probably go on the low priority list. Maybe if it's Yo Timex Sinclair slaps, the kids would get it these days.
Yeah, there you
go. Since we still have a couple minutes, is there anything we want to talk about at the next meeting? We don't have an agenda yet, and we never really come up with one that we followed. Like today, we followed very closely. So good job for us.
Well, today's agenda was shoved from the last meeting.
True.
Yeah.
Well, who knew that paint colors would be so divisive from our last meeting. Actually,
yeah.
Ingo,
I still have more to say about that. Hold on.
What? No. About colors?
No.
Where's the mute button?
Ingo, do you want to show off your progress on your Kilozet next time, especially with the recipe and stuff?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll set it up so that I can screen share the output as well.
Cool.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
All right.
And do you want to give us an update next time, maybe, David, of the Pico project and how it's going? Like, sure. Really, just to let the group know how it's going.
Progress is progress, right?
Yeah.
Let me just summarize it by saying that beta testing is exactly that, and we are going through all of the issues of beta testing.
Well, there is that.
as Ryan said, a beta tester walked into a bar and it burst into flames. All right.
As
Well,
long as it doesn't involve a smoke test.
well, we have successfully passed the smoke test. You know, the smoking in bed test, I don't know about that.
You know, Intel processors run on smoke because when the smoke comes out, they quit.
Well, actually, Paul, that's all electronics. You let out the magic blue smoke, and that's it. Okay, gentlemen. For some of us, there's still enough day left in the day. For Greg, there's plenty of day left in the day.
Yeah, well, the sunset's a little earlier in Hawaii. It starts
Oh,
at
Yeah.
7. So
is it
Yeah,
closer
his
to the?
daylight is less.
Or is it because it's closer to the equator?
Yep.
I think it's just the time zone is not necessarily coordinated with the way.
Oh, okay.
Well, it
Okay.
is a lower latitude, so when I was in England, it wasn't getting dark until like after 10.
Well, I mean, clearly where Greg is, it's already, pitch black. All right. On that note, which I'm disappointed that none of you applauded my terrible joke.
Well,
We
Hawaii
didn't hear
is
any screaming.
Hawaii is earlier, not later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's what I said. When Greg joined us, he said it was 8 a.m. his time.
oh, well, that's not true.
All right, gentlemen, it's been fun as usual.
Take care, everybody.
All right.
See you. Bye.
All right.
Take care.
Yeah.